This is Sound on Film, a series of broadcasts on films and the people who make them. This program, Zabriskie, What's the Point? An hour of comment and argument concerning the renowned Italian director Michelangelo Antonioni's new MGM film, Zabriskie Point. This is Antonioni's first film since Blow Up in 1966, and the first film he has made in America. Since its release, Zabriskie Point has left critics and audiences polarized between their intense reactions to Antonioni's vision of contemporary America. The contrasting attitudes towards this film are reflected in this broadcast, which was originally produced and aired on WBAI-FM, the listener-sponsored station in New York City. The great amount of listener reaction which greeted that initial broadcast suggested that we make it a part of this series so that you might hear it now. Zabriskie, What's the Point? With the participants, in the order of their initial comments, Al Lees, film critic for WBAI Radio, Harrison Starr, executive producer of Zabriskie Point, John Simon, film critic for The New Leader and contributor to the New York Times, Joseph Gelmis, film critic for the Long Island newspaper Newsday and author of the new Doubleday book, The Director as Superstar, and art critic Martin Last. Moderating the discussion, here is Al Lees.
Very few critics equivocate about this film. A handful who damned it were willing to admit there are certain aspects of artistry present. A few who endorsed it have done so with a reservation or two. Most, however, have resolutely praised the film as a masterpiece or damned it as a total failure. There hasn't been this kind of armed camp controversy about a film since 2001, nearly 2 years ago. I know I'm curious to learn something of the background of the film project, and so I address myself first to Mr. Starr. I'm sure you're braced to be asked about some of the rumors that MGM had made major cuts in the film that were reinstated by the new management. Specifically, several critics in my big sheaf have spoken of a skywriting sequence that's missing from the released prints. At what point was this intended to appear?
Like the ant in the poem, it n'existe pas. It never existed. No, there was no skywriting, and as a matter of fact, in Cyrus's review, he referred to something that also didn't exist, and that was, and I don't know what my language restrictions are here, but it was
only the FCC. 5 golden words.
Supposedly, well, fuck off America, which wasn't ever in the script or intended. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of rumors, naturally, about any kind of film and I'm trying to find the proper phrase. A film such as Antonioni's bears more than the usual load of attention. Antonioni in America, all these proclamations of purpose of what the great maestro is doing, and all the nonsense that accumulates to this sort of project, you can imagine was multiplied tenfold by the fact that it was supposed to have been hot politically. Mm-hmm. And so the rumor was the major thing that we had to deal with.
May I ask, what does the girl write in the sand?
She writes off.
And some kind of a peace symbol or an exclamation point?
Exclamation. Not even that, because as we photographed it, it was photographed sufficient to be seen, but he chose the lower angle, I think, because it, as I remember, it gave a better example, of a better tie-in of the plane coming back across the background. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't off America, it was just off, you know.
Yeah,
it would have been, I mean, you can see that would have been totally out of context, even if Michelangelo had missed at this point.
Can I ask a question? It's a double-edged question, because I hadn't read all of the details about what was supposed to have been cut and put back, but Bo Polk, the former president, I think it was, at MGM, was in fact a former Nixon campaigner and supporter and so on, and apparently there was some feeling, from what I have heard secondhand, about perhaps the film would put America in an unfavorable light, and he did not approve before the change in management when Jim Aubrey came in. That was one aspect of it, and the other thing was this whole question of the sexuality, which I had been led to expect was in it, because, in fact, there were rumors coming out, or statements coming out, that it was a federal grand jury meeting in Sacramento, looking into possible Mann Act violations, which is transporting minors across state lines for immoral purposes.
Not minors.
Minors. Anybody?
Anybody.
Oh, well, that's what threw me, because, in
Well,
fact, when you
women
see the
anyway.
film...
You can transport men for Imhoff.
When you see the film, there is no question that those people from the Joe Chaikin Open Theater or whatever that was, that there was no minors involved. That threw me. Well, this clarifies part of it. But these are all rumors that surrounded this film long before it came out. It built up an enormous expectation of a political confrontation of a sort that hadn't been seen before, possibly, and also of a kind of sexuality which enraged the populace in California, where, you know, nothing has enraged them in 50 years of filmmaking, except for one other incident.
Not all the gambling, prostitution, mafia infiltration,
Right.
etc.
How do you account, or do you? Is there any way to
Well,
account
the point
for
was that there
agitation?
was. Yeah, I think that, well, yes, in one way, just to begin with, Antonioni's work style is different than the Hollywood style. The Hollywood style is threatened by numerous changes, both within the film industry and without. And consequently, they were more than nervous about the film being made in his style, and they were determined that it was going to be made in their style. So there was an immediate conflict. Now, the business also, as you know, has a steaming political past with some pretty unpleasant corpses coming up to the surface. And there's a large right-wing element that was against the film being made at all, and then, of course, the rumors began to... I found that someone had written, and it was true, that I found my office had been rifled and scripts had been stolen. We'd kept our scripts private because Michelangelo doesn't like to have a script out, number one. It may be continually changing. It may not be the script. There could be numerous reasons, but the scripts were stolen. Obviously, they were distributed to people who had some political animosity toward the picture, and that was the beginning. And from there on, the rumors that we were having the flag, torn apart, desecrated, etc., became rife. They plagued us wherever we went. And MGM was in a difficult spot. They were suffering their own internal problems, and they couldn't go out fighting a political crusade, particularly in Southern California. And consequently, these rumors were allowed to burgeon. I think they just became gonflé, puffed up beyond all measure. And you spoke specifically about the sexual scenes. Well, the sexual scenes weren't anything that would offend the average enlightened viewer, I guess you'd say. And certainly nothing that would be stopped in almost any state in the Union, except where some local sheriff says, they're not going to show that in my town.
But the Mann Act part of it was the unusual.
Well, the point
section.
was that it was based on the sexual activity, supposedly that took place because we brought people from Las Vegas, where we'd rehearsed them, Joe Chaikin's group had rehearsed them, across state lines, the state line into California for the filming. And if this was truly an immoral act, naturally we'd violated the Mann Act. It was a way for them to get at us, actually. It was that one, they were looking for a peg. And that's what...
Aren't we in danger of talking around the film instead of about the film?
That's what I was beginning to wonder.
I have great admiration for Antonioni's work. I think La Ventura is probably one of the 10 greatest films ever made, if there is such a thing as an all-time hit parade of that sort. I think The Eclipse is a very important film too, and scattered through other films of Antonioni, there are brilliant passages and important contributions to the art of filmmaking. I think he's a first-rate filmmaker, and I don't question that for a moment. I do, however, think that he has made, like other great artists, bad works. I think Red Desert is one of them, for example. I think some of his early stuff, Il Grido, is not a particularly good film, and I think certainly this one is possibly his worst, not counting maybe some of the very early stuff he did. I think the reason the film is bad is that it is so elliptical that nothing is really explored in it very much. I think it's bad because what viewing of things and people there is superficial, settles for surfaces rather than probing behind them. I think it suffers from a naivete, which consists of a kind of nostalgic, sentimental admiration for the life of the hippies, which may stem from the fact that Antonioni, despite the fact that he's an emancipated human being, is still, like most Italians, under the spell of the Catholic Church and under that kind of bourgeois Catholic morality, which, though he has personally shaken, he is still psychically possessed by, and he therefore has this undue admiration for these kids whom he takes to be the true crusaders against the old middle-class bourgeois sexual and other values. I think the approach to them is very soft. I think the conservative values which he is against, the quote reactionary values, are represented in very simple black and white, I should say mostly black terms. Almost all cops are beasts. They shoot people on sight. If a black activist comes out to surrender manifestly not carrying a gun, a cop shouts he's armed and shoots him on sight. If a kid returns a plane that he has stolen and thereby proves that he is at least honest enough to return it, he is shot on sight. Now, Mr. Starr will tell us that something like that actually happened and that this is based on some kind of a newspaper fact, to which I will answer that what is possible in life is not necessarily possible in art.
How do you know I'd tell you that?
Yes.
Well, I'm expecting it.
Where do you,
Wow.
huh?
Because
Well,
a lot of the
listen,
MGM people have been
listen.
telling me that already, so I assume
Well,
that you
I'm
will
not an
too.
MGM person, so let's just
Oh,
start
I
from
see.
that,
You're
all
one of the
right?
fifth columnists at MGM. Well, an
No,
infiltrator.
again, that's not at all the case. I'm hired to do a picture, and once the picture's over, that's it.
All right, fine.
So you
well,
can say that I've been off the picture for some time, and you can deal with me directly without any aura of MGM behind me,
Okay,
or
fine,
assume what I'm going
fine,
to say
fine,
before I've said it, all right?
fine.
Good.
Anyway, then somebody else will tell me that.
Not at this table, John.
And,
Somebody's already told you that, at least.
Right. So I say that's irrelevant. I say that the sort of the rich people in the film, the rich grown-up people, are without exception unappetizing. Rod Taylor, though he is at least good-looking and seems to be vaguely interested and concerned in the girl, which might give him one positive or two positive qualities, is nevertheless shown as an out-and-out business operator with nothing but developing the land into ghastly sort of housing developments instead of leaving it natural and beautiful. So on. In other words, the dice in the film are consistently loaded against the old or middle-aged and for the young and so-called revolutionary. I think that everything that is said in the film is either commonplace or banal. I think the dialogue is pathetic. I think there are scenes that are meant to show the quaint, weird corruption of America, which produced 10-year-olds that 10-year-old kids in a small desert town that try to get a piece of out of the heroin. The kids are manifestly embarrassed by what they're supposed to do and don't even know what they're really saying, one feels, and you feel that the queerness and weirdness of that scene is dragged in by Sam Shepard or somebody, and there's really nothing to do with 10-year-old kids there or elsewhere. And so on down the line. Anyway, so finally, the two positive values of the film, which really shine out of this farrago of death valleys and billboards and civilization in its death throes and so on, are two visions that the heroine has. One vision in which the Death Valley desert suddenly becomes populated with couples and triples who are indulging in all kinds of peculiar sexual games. And these funny sort of Joseph Chaikin, Grotowskian improvisations are supposed to be set up as some great, positive, marvelous, healthy love value in the world. And they're just funny and oafish, I think. And the second vision is one of a very sumptuous and perhaps vulgarly ostentatious desert mansion blowing up. And the blowing up is shown 6 or 7 times, ever more closely, ever more lovingly recorded. And this is and then we see the various furniture and accoutrements of the house floating in the air, going to pieces. And the girl who visualizes this smiles happily after that and drives off into a gorgeous natural sunset. And if these are the two positive values, I mean, that are being held up, the Chaikin open theater creeps carrying on in the borax, and
What did you
this-
call? Oh, what did you call them?
creeps, and the fancy, expensive house going up in pieces, then I think those aren't positive enough values, and they're not worth either blowing up houses for or making a $6 million movie for.
May I? It didn't cost that much.
Well, five and 800,000 or
No,
whatever.
no.
It was
quite
very
that.
close to 6. But those are the official figures.
But he's the
official
producer.
figures
Isn't he in a
lie.
position to
It
tell us
doesn't
more
matter.
about it?
That's quibbling. It doesn't the point.
They
There's something I
fluctuate
wanted to
greatly.
ask you, and that is, did you see the people who were in the radical meeting and the hippie kids as the same group of kids, youthful hippie, as you call them, and self-indulgent kids?
Yeah, I mean, those kids were mouthing student revolutionary commonplaces and platitudes right and left. We were not given the facts of their problem, partly because of Antonioni's elliptic method of dealing with things. There is no establishing material. I mean, we are in medias res, which works sometimes, but which does not work where there is presumably a thorny issue at stake where the other side must have a position too, but no spokesman for the other side is allowed
Well,
into the
you
film.
wouldn't expect a university spokesman to have been in a meeting like that.
No, but in a film, yes. In the meeting, no. I mean, if you're trying to tell us something about that situation, then both sides of the situation have to be somehow visualized by the director.
I think that's sort of a classical approach that you may have done if you'd done the picture, but I don't think it's necessary in this case because that's not the point. I think the point isn't that you sing the opposition of conservative forces. We all know what they are in the universities, or where they aren't, or where they become liberal, or where they become whatever they become in the spectrum. But I think that the point was that he's talking about the militant, the radical militant movement itself, and it wasn't. These are not hippies. They were, they weren't at all hippies. As a matter of fact, they were Black Panthers. The blacks were Black Panthers who had been involved in similar situations on campuses in the Bay Area. And what he was trying to show was the factionalism in the radical militant movement and not a hippie. I think that you have to say that the boy and girl who are the supposed protagonists of the picture, and I'd like to make a point here, just if I could interject, even though it's off. The protagonist of L'Avventura is not the lost girl. I think we all understand that. And that many cases the protagonist of an Antonioni movie are not the people in the foreground. And that these protagonists did have, various, the girl was somewhat hippie, but she's the only young person in the film who has that, what do you want to call it?
Well, the boys too. I mean, after all, he paints the plane in typical flower child fashion and so on and so forth. I mean, he's a
But
dropout.
That's
I mean, he
done
has...
with the girl as a joke.
Oh, well, I mean, you can say that the whole film is done as a joke. I mean, as it is shown in the film, this is supposed to be one of the few positive values in the film.
What, you mean the painting of the plane?
Yes, this is shown as a poetic, fanciful, charming, peace-loving, love-loving gesture on the part of these kids.
Now, can we square the circle so we all get a piece of this? Because
Yeah,
I've been listening a long time to John, and now John is being fed questions, and I'd like to get my 2 cents in here. I think, first, I've never really liked an Antonioni film the first time I've seen it. This is my particular hang-up. The first time I saw L'Avventura in 1960, partly because I was a lot younger, partly because of the fact I had maybe not been married much in preparation, and I think, for me, it came to be a film about relationships between, obviously, men and women, and not about the missing girl. And I was more concerned then, as I was when I first saw Blow Up, about the murder than about really what he was talking about. It wasn't the thing in the foreground. All right, the point is, this is the first Antonioni film I have seen which I felt an immediate reaction to, a positive reaction to, the first time I saw it. And I've seen many flaws in the film. Many of them are mentioned by John, but it was sort of an inventory of flaws without grasping, so far as I'm concerned, what was relevant and what was central, what was the spine of the film. And I think there was a spine to the film, at least the way I saw it. It was a personal reaction. Maybe I'm reading something into it, but I think that's one of the dangers of any kind of ambiguity. And we're constantly dealing with movies that are full of ambiguity. I think that this is a film about a young girl, the only flower child, if you want to call her that, in the film, who is radicalized. And she's radicalized by someone who has more activist feelings than she ever has. It's a story about a girl who starts out accommodating, being able to work within the system and to work 2 or 3 days a week when, as she says, she needs the bread as a secretary, and then she drops out and smokes pot and does her thing and so on, and then she comes back. She is able to forge some kind of compromise where she's able to live with the system, with the Rod Taylors, and then when she meets him, with the young activist. And therefore, in effect, it's her film in the sense that, so far as I can see, she's the only one who really gets changed in any way in the film. Now, whether the nature of her change is purely an emotional change and a kind of a reaction and anger to the death of the boy at the end, or whether, in fact, it's some kind of a total emotional, psychic radicalization, I don't think really is necessarily as important as the fact that she does change. I think that it's a film which has to do with parallel lifestyles, and I think that these are very well delineated. Now, no, John, I just assumed you didn't interrupt, as a matter of fact. I listened 7, 8, 10 minutes.
I'm
Okay,
going to say it
fine.
afterwards.
Fine. Good. I think that this is a film that starts out with the revolutionaries talking, and as the boy says when he finally leaves, I'm willing to die, but not of boredom. Because, in fact, that is the factionalism. I've talked to radicals who recognize themselves and the situation they're constantly involved in that particular scene, this constant quarreling, constant deciding over tactics and so on. Now, I think the one weakness with the boy, for example, is the fact that he is not sufficiently, for me, in his face or in his actions or in his person, as a persona, he does not sum up for me someone who has been in some way so driven to desperation up against the wall that he has a justifiable right to pick up the gun. That was a weakness for me. It didn't bother me as much as it bothered a lot of my more radical friends. I think possibly a Terence Stamp with that haunted look in his eyes might have been better, or even a David Hemmings. I don't know. You needed somebody who looked like he was really up against the wall. It's possible that, in fact, he never really intended to use the gun. The 2 times he tries to draw the gun, or he does draw the gun in one case, that in fact he's bluffing, he's kidding himself, and that's why he returns the plane eventually, because in fact he hasn't really even come to that point where he can pull the trigger, or that he can do the totally outlaw thing. In any case, you've got an activist and you've got the girl, and the third force in this case is the really straight world. You've got the hip as defined by the activist and the fellow child who drops out, who makes compromises, the boy who won't, who's ready to kill a cop. And then you have the very straight world of the master builder. You've got the guy who's subdividing the land, who's subdividing the real estate, who's planning the future, who's making all this incredibly beautiful commercial which they made. He's preparing to make the desert bloom for plastic people in the illustration in the commercial. He is, in fact, Ibsen's master builder, and it is youth knocking on the door, and in fact, they're throwing Molotov cocktails in the window. I mean, that couldn't be clearer. That part is there. Now, everybody always says in all the reviews that are negative, it's so obvious what the film is. I never heard anybody come to grips with what the film is, and that sort of indicates to me that people have not worked out for themselves whatever the equivalents are, whether it's this equivalent or some other equivalent, if it's that obvious. And there's one incredible scene. There are many incredible scenes, which are as beautiful as anything I've seen in movies in the last couple of years, and probably as I'm going to see this year anyway. There's one particular scene where they're establishing who Rod Taylor really is, and he's like a founding father with that incredibly rock granite chin. He's in his office, and he's taking time out because he's got a sexual interest in the girl in a scene we never see. There's this development, apparently, where he meets her and he gets involved with her sexually, and also he's going to make her an assistant or something. He's in a room that has a whole wall, which is a window, a glass window, and he's looking out on a monolithic building, it's terraced, and it looks like the building in Metropolis. Now, that's another weak film, right? Well, the fact is that, even that film, which had a lot of nonsense and a lot of silliness, is an archetypal film. It belongs to this century. It belongs to where we're at in this century, and that's why this film is important. This is a man who lives not only in the mobile gas building with all the glass and the mechanics and all this, the angles and the symmetry and all this impersonal sort of world, but he also, right behind him, is the place where, in Fritz Lang's Metropolis, the rulers of the world lived. He's there. There's one incredible shot and there's an American flag blowing in the background. One incredible shot from the ground up at him, and he looks like the Lincoln Monument in Washington. There he is. It's Mount Rushmore. He's the founding father. Now, none of this is spelled out, and if that's what's obvious to people, nobody has said it. To me, that was obvious, and it was beautiful. I didn't have to think too hard about it. I felt it emotionally. Now, maybe that's not what he meant. That's what I got. There's more. I just want to get mine out so then we can argue. Subsequently, she's in the desert at this point. Now, there's a desert scene there. Somebody else said was obvious, but it had nothing to do with 10-year-old boys just wanting to get a piece of. These are the kids who are sort of like the problem, in effect, in Middle America. She stops in a little town where she wants to meet some guy who has gone out there to do something, radicalize the locals or something. I don't know what he wants to do, because we never meet him, which is wonderful. It's very enigmatic. I don't know what he's doing out there. Something subversive, beautiful. She stops in a cafe where all these derelicts of Western civilization, a guy who was a prize-fighting middleweight champ in the 1920s is there talking through his nose with this incredible roomy-eyed kind of, he's lost, he's debris, he's cast aside. They're playing Tennessee Waltz with Patti Page, and there's somebody drinking coffee very characteristically at the bar. This is Americana. The guy's talking, the cafe proprietor's talking
He's
about...
drinking beer at
Beer.
the bar.
Beer,
It's
fine.
become too characteristic.
Fine, okay, even more characteristic, beautiful. He's, the cafe proprietor talks about somebody coming in and changing the old ways. You see a rock hurl through the window. There's this kind of, there's this feeling of something brewing and disturbing. Americana, the old values, something that exists, that hasn't changed. Okay. What the kids are is anybody's guess. I'm not sure, but there's something out there. They're the next generation. They're my 12-year-old son going down and demonstrating in the street without telling me in front of Foley Square.
Going down at the age of 12, that's...
Precisely, John, sure is. But that's where they're at, John, and I think it's time we understood it, because I didn't even know he was going to demonstrate the Black Panther trial outside on Monday. In any case, the next big scene, the most important scene for me, because it was one of the most romantic passages in movies that I've seen in ages and ages, was the romance between the two machines, the plane and the car. The boy has stolen this plane. And incidentally, the boy, and this disturbed me, there was sort of I think that the Europeans really have a conspiracy mentality, and they really believe, for example, something which I have never been able to fully believe, that there was a conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. And I recognized in the boy, both in the fact that he wore a T-shirt, but the fact that after he did or did not kill somebody, but he was prepared apparently to, somebody else did, I recognized Lee Harvey Oswald, the whole situation. He gets on a bus, takes off, goes as far as he can, and then he steals a plane, and subsequently he gets killed for the wrong reason, for a dumb reason, for an absurd reason, because the cops are all uptight because of the plane, rather than knowing that he's the guy they're looking for in the cop murder. In other words, Jack Ruby killed him for the dumb reason, not because he did kill Kennedy or didn't, but because of some nonsensical, absurdist reason. In any case, you have this romance with the car and the plane, and visually, emotionally, it's an incredible passage. The car crosses over the plane, plane, which would be a great trick. A plane crosses over the car, which is stopped for water briefly, and it's almost, as an ex-navigator, it was like, it was pinpoint bombing. He went right over the shadow you see coming across the desert from on high, and it crosses directly over the car, like star-crossed lovers, this sort of thing. His path crosses hers. Then he starts zooming after her, inches, from a variety of angles, inches off the car. This is before they've even met, before he knows who she is. But I think he recognizes there was a girl standing outside, so he knows it's a good-looking chick.
How does he know that? He's flying at great speed, at considerable
Great speed
height.
in a Piper Cub, John. You don't know anything about aviation, John, because a Piper Cub doesn't cruise at more than 125 miles an hour.
You're listening to Sound on Film, a series of broadcasts on films and the people who make them. This program, Zabriskie, What's the Point?